Sing to me, muse, of that endlessly cunning man, who was blown off course to the ends of the earth, in the years after he plundered Troy. He passed through the cities of many people and learned how they thought, and he suffered many bitter hardships upon the high seas as he tried to save his own life and bring his companions back to their home. But however bravely he struggled, he could not rescue them, fools that they were. Their own recklessness brought disaster upon them all. They slaughtered and ate the cattle of Helios. So the sun god destroyed them and blotted out their homecoming. Goddess, daughter of Zeus, begin now, wherever you wish to, and tell the story again, for us. All the Achaeans, who had survived the war and the voyage home, had long since returned to their houses. That man alone still longed for his land and his wife. The beautiful nymph Calypso was keeping him inside her cavern, wanting to make him her husband. But when the revolving seasons at last brought round the year that the gods had appointed for his homecoming to Ithaca, not even then was he free of troubles. And among his own people, all the gods pitied him, except for Poseidon, who worked with relentless malice against him, until the day when he reached his own country. But that god had gone to visit the distant race of the Ethiopians. Out at the edge of the world, they live in two different regions, half of them where the sun god sets, and half of them where he rises. They had sacrificed hundreds of bulls and rams, and he sat at the banquet, delighted. Meanwhile the other immortals were assembled in Zeus's palace on Mount Olympus, and the father of men and gods was the first to speak. He felt troubled because he was thinking now of Aegisthus, whom Orestes, Agamemnon's son, had just killed. Thinking of him, he spoke out to the assembly, "How ready these mortals are to accuse the gods. They say that all evils come from us, though their own recklessness brings them grief beyond what is fated." Beyond his fair share Aegisthus slept with the wife of Agamemnon, then murdered him when he came home. He knew this would end in disaster. We ourselves told him when we sent down Hermes to caution him not to kill that man, or to touch his wife, since vengeance would come from Orestes once he reached manhood and longed for his country. That is what Hermes said, but his kind words didn't convince Aegisthus, and now he has paid for his crimes. To this, the grey-eyed goddess Athena answered, "Father of us, sovereign above all rulers, clearly Aegisthus deserved to be killed, and so does anyone else who commits such crimes. But my heart aches for Odysseus, that ill-fated man, who for so long has been pining away, far from his friends and family, upon a remote island, imprisoned there by Calypso, the daughter of Atlas, that brutal Titan whose sight can pierce to the depths of the sea and who guards the lofty pillars that separate earth from heaven. She is the one who detains that unfortunate man. Ceaselessly, with her soft, insidious words, she tries to entice him and make him forget his homeland, Ithaca. But Odysseus, heartsick to glimpse even a wisp of smoke from his own chimneys, longs to die. Yet you are untouched by his sorrow. Didn't his many sacrifices at Troy win your approval? What do you have against him, father, that you have made him suffer this way?" Zeus responded, "How can you say such a thing, my dear child? I could never forget Odysseus, that excellent man, who surpasses all mortals in wisdom and has sacrificed to the gods more than all others. The truth is that Poseidon the Earth-shaker holds a grudge against him. He hates him for blinding the eye of Polyphemus the Cyclops, who is his son, conceived by the nymph Thoosa, daughter of Phorcys, the old man of the sea, when she made love with Poseidon in her ocean cave. And my brother, ever since then, has relentlessly stood in Odysseus's way. He stops short of killing him, but he torments his heart by keeping him stranded, far from his own dear country. But now it is time. Let all of us who are here think of a way to bring him back home. Poseidon will have to swallow his anger. He won't be able to resist the will of all the immortal gods." To this, the grey-eyed goddess Athena answered, "Father of us, sovereign above all rulers, if it is acceptable now to the blessed gods that Odysseus at last should return to his own dear country, let us send Hermes the messenger to Ogygia to tell that beautiful nymph of our firm decision to let Odysseus go home. In the meantime I myself will go down to Ithaca, and put courage into the heart of his son and urge him to call a great assembly and speak out in front of the suitors, who, every day, kill more of his sheep and cattle. And then I will send him to Sparta and sand-swept Pylos. Perhaps he will hear some news of his father's return, and will win the praise of mankind for his exertions." When she finished, she tied on a pair of beautiful sandals, and down to earth, she flew from the heights of Olympus to the Isle of Ithaca, and at Odysseus's gateway she landed, in front of his house, at the courtyard's entrance. Holding a heavy bronze spear in her hand, she appeared in the form of a stranger, Mentes, the Taphians' king. She found the suitors sitting outside the door on hides of Odysseus's oxen that they themselves had slaughtered. They were taking their ease and playing at backgammon. Heralds and servants bustled around, some mixing wine and water for them in large bowls, others carving them lavish portions of meat, or wiping the tables with sponges, and setting the food out. Telemachus was the first of the men to see her. He was sitting among the suitors, troubled at heart, daydreaming that his great father had come back home from wherever he was and had driven the suitors out headlong, and regained his honors and ruled his house once again. As he imagined all this, he caught sight of Athena, and he hurried straight to the entrance, ashamed that a guest had been waiting, neglected, at the front door. He went up, clasped her right hand and took her spear, and he said, "Welcome, sir. You will find me a courteous host. Have something to eat, then tell me why you have come here." With these words he led the way, and Athena followed. And when they entered the palace, he placed a spear upright inside the spear rack, against a tall pillar, along with the many spears that belonged to Odysseus. He led her to a magnificent chair, and upon it he spread a fine linen cloth, and had her sit down, and he pulled out a stool for her feet. Then he drew up a smaller chair for himself, apart from the suitors, so his guest would not be disturbed by their noise, their rudeness, and their insolence, and turn with disgust from the meal. Besides, he wanted to ask some questions about his absent father. Soon a handmaid came up with a beautiful golden jug, and she poured clear water over their hands as they rinsed them, catching it in a silver basin, and then she placed by their side a table of polished wood. And a carver served them with platters of all kinds of meats, and 2 golden cups, which a herald kept coming back to refill with wine. Then all the suitors entered and took their places on benches and chairs throughout the hall. Their attendants poured water over their hands, and the serving women brought out large wicker baskets piled high with bread, and they helped themselves to the food that was set before them. And when they had eaten and drunk as much as they wanted, the suitors turned their attention to other matters, to singing and dancing, which are the crown of a feast. A herald brought out a beautiful lyre and gave it to Phemius the poet, who sang for the suitors against his will. They forced him to entertain them. So, sweeping the strings, he struck the first chords of the prelude. As Phemius played, Telemachus said to Athena, with his head bent close so that nobody else would hear him, "Dear stranger, I hope that you will not be offended if I speak my mind. Those men over there, it is easy for them to think of nothing but singing and dancing. They are sponges, consuming someone else's estate without paying for it. Someone whose white bones lie out in the rain, washed up on some distant shore, or tumble about in the pounding waves of the sea. If he ever returned to Ithaca, you can be certain that each one of them would pray to be faster, not richer. But that man has certainly died by now. It is hopeless, and we have no consolation, even if someone came to assure us that someday he will return. He never will. But tell me, and tell me truly, who are you and who are your parents? Where do you come from? And tell me also, I really would like to know, if this is your first time here. Or are you a friend of my father's? He used to entertain many guests in the old days, and used to visit a lot as well. Athena answered, "Certainly I will tell you. I am Mentes, son of Anchialus, and I am king of the seafaring Taphians. I and my crew have put in here on our voyage to foreign lands. We are bound for Cyprus, bringing a cargo of iron to trade for copper. I am indeed a friend of your father's, and have been for a very long time. Just go and ask Lord Laertes. I hear he no longer comes to the town, but stays out on his farm and lives a hard life, with only one old woman as his attendant, who serves him with food and drink when exhaustion takes hold of his limbs as he trudges back home across the slopes of his vineyard. I have come here because men said that he had appeared, your father. But now I can see they were wrong. The gods are still delaying his journey. He isn't dead, though, I am sure of that. He must be alive still, somewhere, on some desolate island, far out at sea, a captive of savage tribesmen, who keep him against his will. I am no seer or soothsayer, but the immortals have put a prophecy into my mind. I am certain that it will come true. And this is what I foresee: Odysseus will soon return to his own dear country. Even if he is bound up in iron chains, he will find some way to escape. He is a man of infinite cunning. But tell me now, are you really his son? You must be. You certainly look like him, with your face and your handsome eyes. It is really quite an amazing resemblance. Oh, I remember him well. We spent a great deal of time together, before he sailed to Troy with the rest of the Argive commanders, though since that day we have never set eyes on each other. Telemachus, that sensible young man, said, "Friend, I will speak as frankly as you have spoken. My mother says that I am his son, though of course I cannot know that. No man can ever be sure who his own father is. But I wish that I were the son of some man, who was blessed to attain old age at home with his family, enjoying his own possessions. As it is, the one who everyone says is my father must be the most unfortunate of all men." Athena answered, "Yet surely the gods have apportioned great honor to you and your line, since Penelope gave birth to such an excellent son. But tell me, who are these fellows? What are they doing here carrying on like this? I have never seen such a rowdy, insolent crowd of gluttons, carousing in every room of your palace. Any good man would be disgusted at such indecent behavior." Telemachus said, "You may well ask me, my friend. This house was once rich and orderly, when the man we are speaking of lived here. Since then, the gods in their malice have changed their plans, and have made him vanish from sight as no other man has. I wouldn't have grieved so much if he had been cut down among his comrades at Troy, for then the Achaean commanders would have built him a funeral mound, and he would have won lasting fame for his son as well. But the storm winds have swept him away without a trace. He has gone and left me with nothing but sorrow and tears. Nor do I mourn just for him, since the gods have brought down other troubles upon me. All the princes who rule the neighboring islands of Dulichian, Sam, and forest-covered Zacynthus, and the noblemen who have power in Ithaca, all these men are courting my mother, and as they do they devour my possessions. And though she hates the idea of remarrying, she can neither reject it outright nor can she choose. Meanwhile these men are destroying my inheritance, and soon they will bring me to ruin. A funeral mound, and he would have won lasting fame for his son as well. But the storm winds have swept him away without a trace. He has gone and left me with nothing but sorrow and tears. Nor do I mourn just for him, since the gods have brought down other troubles upon me. All the princes who rule the neighboring islands of Dulichian, Sam, and forest-covered Zacynthus, and the noblemen who have power in Ithaca, all these men are courting my mother, and as they do they devour my possessions. And though she hates the idea of remarrying, she can neither reject it outright nor can she choose. Meanwhile these men are destroying my inheritance, and soon they will bring me to ruin." Deeply indignant, Pallas Athena answered, "What gall! If only Odysseus could be here now to wipe out this arrogant mob," and stood at the door with his helmet and shield, and spears in his hands, as strong and vigorous as he was the first time I saw him in our palace, taking his pleasure in wine and food. He was traveling back from Ephyra, after a visit to Ilus, the son of Murmurus. He had sailed there in search of a deadly poison to spread on the bronze tips of his arrows. Ilus refused to supply it, in reverence for the eternal gods. But my father, who was very fond of Odysseus, gave it to him. If he still is the man he was at that time, and came to confront these fellows, they would all meet with a swift death and a bitter marriage. But such things lie in the hands of the gods, of course, whether or not he returns to take vengeance upon them in his own house. Meanwhile, you need to act and come up with a way to get rid of the suitors. Early tomorrow morning call an assembly, invite the lords of this island and lay out your case before them. Call on the gods as your witnesses, and command the suitors to leave. And here is some further advice. I hope you will listen. Take your best ship and man it with 20 oarsmen, and set out to look for your father, who has been gone for so long. Maybe someone has seen him, or maybe you will hear some rumor of him that turns out to be true. First go to Pylos and interview Nestor, from there go on to Sparta, to Menelaus, since he was the last to return of all the Achaean commanders. And if you hear that your father is still alive and on his way home, just grit your teeth and hold out for 1 more year. But if you should learn of his death, come back at once, build him a tomb, and perform all the funeral honors that are his due, then give your mother in marriage to a new husband. And when you return, start thinking of how to kill these insolent suitors, whether you do it by stealth or attack them openly. It is no longer fitting for you to act like a child, since you are a man now. Haven't you heard what fame Orestes has won all over the world because he cut down Aegisthus, the treacherous man who murdered his father? You too, and I see what a tall and well-built young fellow you are, must act boldly, so that men of the future will praise you. But now I have to go back to my ship and comrades, who are probably growing impatient at this delay. I leave the matter to you. Think my words over. Telemachus said, Friend, you have spoken to me with great kindness, as a father would speak to his son, and I will not forget your words. But though you are eager to go to your ship, stay here with me in the palace until you have taken a bath and refreshed yourself. Then you can leave with a beautiful gift, the kind of precious thing that a host gives an honored guest. Athena answered, Don't keep me here any longer, I need to be on my way now. As for your gift, choose some treasure, and hold it for me until I stop here on my way back. And I assure you, you won't lose in the exchange when you visit my house. Then, in an instant, Athena disappeared, flying up through the air like a bird. And she filled his heart with strength and courage, and brought his father to mind more vividly than ever. He felt the change and was wonderstruck. He knew that a god had been with him. And at once he rejoined the suitors, godlike himself. The famous poet was singing for them, and they sat and listened to him in silence. He sang the bitter tale of the Achaeans' homecoming from Troy, and the misery that Athena caused them. Upstairs, Penelope, Icarius's wise daughter, heard his inspired singing, and from her room in the women's quarters she walked down the great staircase, and 2 of her handmaids followed closely behind her. And when she came near the suitors, she stopped and stood by one of the roof-bearing pillars, holding her veil across her face, and a handmaid stood on each side. And as tears filled her eyes, she spoke to the god-touched poet, Phemius, you have other tales to enchant us, marvelous tales that you might choose, of the doings of men and gods, which our poets have celebrated. Sing one of these to the company as they listen in silence and drink their wine. But sing us no more of this dismal tale, which always harrows my heart, since beyond all other women, I have been pierced by unassuageable sorrow as I remember and ceaselessly mourn my beloved husband, a man whose glory has spread throughout all Hellas and Argos. Telemachus said to her, Mother, why this request? Would you really deny our poet the right to please us however the spirit moves him? It isn't the poets who are to blame for what happens, but Zeus himself. He deals with each of us mortals as he sees fit. We shouldn't criticize Phemius when he sings of the Danaans' wretched fate, since men always give their highest praise to the newest song they have heard. So don't be upset. Have courage, mother, and listen. Odysseus isn't the only hero who died at Troy. There were many other good men who were killed there. In astonishment at his strong words, she went upstairs to her private quarters, pondering what he had said. She went to her bedroom, accompanied by her maids, and there she mourned and wept for her husband until Athena closed her eyelids in lovely sleep. Phemius, you have other tales to enchant us, marvelous tales that you might choose, of the doings of men and gods, which our poets have celebrated. Sing one of these to the company, as they listen in silence and drink their wine. But sing us no more of this dismal tale, which always harrows my heart, since beyond all other women, I have been pierced by unassuageable sorrow as I remember and ceaselessly mourn my beloved husband, a man whose glory has spread throughout all Hellas and Argos. Telemachus said to her, Mother, why this request? Would you really deny our poet the right to please us however the spirit moves him? It isn't the poets who are to blame for what happens, but Zeus himself. He deals with each of us mortals as he sees fit. We shouldn't criticize Phemius when he sings of the Danaans' wretched fate, since men always give their highest praise to the newest song they have heard. So don't be upset. Have courage, mother, and listen. Odysseus isn't the only hero who died at Troy. There were many other good men who were killed there. In astonishment at his strong words, she went upstairs to her private quarters, pondering what he had said. She went to her bedroom, accompanied by her maids, and there she mourned and wept for her husband until Athena closed her eyelids in lovely sleep. Meanwhile the suitors were making a huge commotion, each man longing to take her to bed. In the midst of all that noise, Telemachus shouted out, Be quiet, all of you. Stop this disgraceful uproar. Let us enjoy the banquet with dignity, for it is a fine thing to listen to such a poet as the one we have here, whose singing is like a god's. And tomorrow morning, let us all take our seats in the meeting place. I want to announce in plain words my decision that you must leave my palace. Go now, feast somewhere else, and eat up your own provisions, moving from house to house. But if it seems better to destroy one man's estate and pay nothing for it, then don't stop. I will call on the heavenly gods, in the hope that Zeus will send you what you deserve, and will let me destroy you right here, without reprisal. Amazed at the young man's boldness, each of the suitors seethed with anger and thought about how to respond. At last Antinous, son of Eupeithes, answered, Telemachus, the gods themselves must have taught you to speak to us in this blustering, arrogant way. I just pray that Zeus won't ever let you be king of Ithaca, though it is what your father bequeathed you. Telemachus said, Antinous, I must tell you that I would be glad to accept that rank if Zeus grants it. It is kind of you to be so concerned for my welfare, but I can assure you, it isn't bad to be king. One's house becomes wealthy, and one is held in more honor. I realize that there are plenty of other princes here on Ithaca, any of whom might rule now that Odysseus is dead, and good luck to that man. But I will at least be master of my own house, and of all the slaves that my father left in my keeping. At once Eurymachus, son of Polybus, answered, Telemachus, it is up to the gods to decide who will be king of Ithaca. By all means keep your possessions, be master of your own house, and may nobody ever rob you of what is yours. But tell me now, my valiant young friend, who was that stranger sitting beside you? Who are his people? Did he bring you news of your father's return, or did he come to see you about some private affair? He seemed as if he was nobly born, but he rushed off so suddenly that none of us got to meet him. Telemachus said, Eurymachus, I am sure that my father will never return. I no longer trust rumors, wherever they come from, nor do I believe the words of the seers and soothsayers whom my mother questions here in the palace. As for the stranger, he is king of the Taphians, and an old friend of my father's. His name is Mentes, son of Anchialus. These are the words he spoke. But in his own heart he knew that the stranger was an immortal goddess. The suitors now turned to the pleasures of singing and dancing, and their revels continued even as twilight came, but at last they departed, and each walked back to his house. Telemachus went to his high-ceilinged room, which was built in a sheltered place with a view of the splendid courtyard, and he walked on, pondering many thoughts in his mind. And with him, holding 2 torches, went Eurycleia, the daughter of Ops the son of Pisanor. Laertes had purchased her many years before, in her youth, for 20 oxen, and he had treated her always with as much respect as he gave his own wife, and he did not sleep with her, for fear of his wife's resentment. She had nursed Telemachus as a child, and of all the handmaids, she was the one who loved him the most. He opened the bedroom door, sat down on the bed, took off his tunic, and handed it to the old woman, who folded it, smoothed it, and hung it up on a hook by the side of the bed. Then slowly she left the room, pulled the door shut, holding its silver handle, and drove the bolt into the hole by its leather strap. And all through the night, wrapped in a woolen blanket, he imagined the journey Athena had told him to make.